Yeah, very good evening to all of you. Don't be worried about my papers. I'm not about to deliver a very long statement here. Thank you very much, Richie, for the kind introduction and warm welcome. And I'd like to start by thanking the Cyrus Vance Center for International Justice for hosting this great event. I would in particular like to thank, I think he's come for that, Mr. Alexander Papakristou, for his unwavering dedication to the cause of freedom and democracy in Africa. It's hard to overstate the importance it is to have reliable friends when you are in the trenches fighting for freedom. And Alex has been a source of great inspiration to many of us in Africa. I am particularly grateful to him for his wise counsel and support, always reminding us why democracy and the rule of law really matters. Thank you, Alex, for your support and friendship to the people of Uganda and Africa. Thank you. I'd like also to thank Alex's staff who've worked tirelessly to make this event possible. And in particular, I'd like to single out Dr. Branda Kombo for her leadership in organizing this event. I would also like to extend a special thanks to you, the African Affairs Committee of the New York City Bar, for co-sponsoring this event. I understand from reliable sources that you've had a bulwark supporting the rule of law in Africa. I salute you for your dedication and contributions to better Africa and better world. I see in this audience many friends and familiar faces. Thank you for welcoming me and for making me feel at home. It's good to be amongst friends, and it is especially inspiring to be amongst those who labor to promote justice and democracy around the world. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a unique and singular honor for me to be here today to address you and to talk to the finest about the ideals and pillars of open and democratic society. In a democratic society and in a diverse and plural society, it is the temple of justice that we go to for peaceful and just adjudication of disputes. It is at the New York State Supreme Court, in the building where it is written, and with good measure, that true administration of justice is the firmest pillar of good governance. And it is also in the founding document of the modern constitutional government, the Magna Carta, where it's written that to no one will we sell, and to no one will we refuse or delay right or justice. And these statements go to the foundation of the rule of law. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you've been indeed informed, I am an African. and I come from a place called Uganda, which is at the heart of Africa. Uganda is a great country. Those of you who have had an interaction with it will have no question about the unique beauty and the rich endowment that our country is favored with. Indeed, we still borrow the words of Churchill in describing it as the Pearl of Africa. It is from this country that I have come, and I'd like to first make some concessions that have already been leaked to you, that I am before you as a prisoner, out on bail. And I've been a prisoner very, very many times in this good country of ours. And in this good country of ours, we have never had any leader hand over power peacefully to another leader. Every single leader of our country has been bombed out of office. And whoever has assumed the reins of power has bombed his way into office. And that is at the heart of my discussion with you today, because that is also at the heart of what has characterized post-colonial Africa. In the just concluded election, where I have been charged with treason, my treason charges are based on two things. One, that I have called for a campaign of defiance. And two, that I declared myself a winner of an election. Now, ladies and gentlemen, my prepared text will be distributed to you at the end of this engagement. So for the benefit of time, I will not go through it. I just want to highlight the salient features contained therein, and hopefully then use them as a basis for engagement after my remarks, that you may make comments or indeed seek clarification or ask questions. You see, we are talking about a country which has no citizens. The citizen, and this is not just for Uganda, for the most part of Africa, the biggest challenge is that we are talking about countries without citizens. And this, quite obviously, is a phenomenon that you are all familiar with when Africa was dominated by force through the colonial advent. Because in Africa we had very primitive weapons to defend ourselves, and the advent of gunpowder rendered our own weapons completely insufficient to do the job. So when the colonial administration came in, all our citizens were not just dominated, but deprived of the citizenship. Citizenship is about being able to make decisions on who will govern your country, on how the resources of the country will be used. And these were the institutions that in the country that they serve the citizens. And these were the things that were taken away at colonialism. The decision to decide how or who governs us, the decision to decide on our resources, the decision on how institutions are run and for whose benefit. And therefore, we changed from being citizens who are masters of our land, who have authority over what happens in the country, and who have authority over its resources and institutions, to subjects. Africans became subjects. And those who had the force of arms became the masters. So I am born by subjects of the Queen of England, not by citizens of Uganda. My parents were subjects of the Queen of England. They had no rights. They did not have any say even on their own labor, how they engage in their own labor. And that is, for some of you who may have experienced that, a very, very painful situation to be in indeed. And no doubt that's why there was agitation for freedom from colonial administration, which again all of us are very familiar with. My engagement today is simply what happened at the time of independence, because whereas indeed our countries were granted independence, which would have meant that the countries were returned to the owners of the countries, that we changed from being citizens, from being subjects to now become citizens and controllers of our countries. Actually, that is not what, that is the one thing that did not happen. The return, the independence simply transferred control of the coercive tools that were used to dominate and control us into the hands of cliques of political elites that then used those tools, same instruments, to run the same institutions, to run the same ideology that we had been run by during the colonial administration. Africans, and certainly Ugandans, remained subjects, did not become citizens. The only difference is that they were not subjects now of foreign people, they were subjects of our own compatriots. And some of our people, in fact, who literally believed that there had been independence, tried to exercise the freedom that comes with that independence, and were rudely shocked. Those were the first ones to end up in prisons for a very long time, some dying there, and others indeed were not so lucky. They were brutally murdered. And everybody reminded that the order remains the same. In this order, the leader is the master, and the subjects are the servants. And that is not what has, that is what has not changed. And the laws and constitutional framework that is developed for that are laws to service the master, not the people. So I think the terminologies that have been indeed used about rule by law, not rule of law, we have lived that practically ourselves, where laws are made to control the subjects, not to facilitate them to do what they ought to do as free citizens. And indeed, laws keep on being tightened and tightened in favor of those who exercise power and authority and against those who should be the citizens of our countries. And all the institutions that indeed had been developed by the colonial authority have remained the same institutions, serving the masters, not the people who are supposed to be the citizens of our countries. In the colonial period, the police was feared because it was the arm that enforced the rule of those who were the masters against the would-be citizens of our countries. And so whenever anybody detected the police was around, they would look for the nearest place to take cover. That has not changed. Today, in my country, and unfortunately we had intended to have some slides that could show some of the things that are happening, unfortunately, because of some miscommunication, we couldn't get it in place. In 2016, in my country, more than half a century after independence, you would see the police and how it brutalizes those who would be the masters of their country. And indeed, in my country, when people see the police, they say, they have come. In local languages, they say, Besigye, they have come. And that is the signal for everybody to scamper. They have come. The fear that comes from institutions that are supposed to protect them, the institutions to which they are supposed to run, and not institutions they are supposed to run away from. The courts function in pretty much the same way. You cannot access justice unless you are privileged to either have a lot of resources on your part, not just to get services of lawyers who will interpret and present your case in an orderly way, but actually to do a little more in facilitating the judge to give you the judgment that you want to get. So the judiciary is not available to the ordinary folks. First, because of the complexity of an ordinary person accessing the judiciary. They will never have, the kind of resources and so on to prepare a case and file a case and proceed with it in the manner that is prescribed by our rules and regulations. And certainly we will not have the kind of resources to facilitate that process, as I have said. So you'll find that the judiciary is there to service the privileged few. And certainly those in authority will quite normally dictate if it is a matter that is political, like that affects the power relations, then they must do what the master says. In Uganda, I must hail the resilience of our judicial officers, actually, because quite a number of them have taken a stand and has been very costly to them. The first African Chief Justice who was not very lucky under Idi Amin. He was arrested from his chambers, and we've never seen him again, nor known where his remains could be. And this has been the case in subsequent administrations. In the current administration of General Yoweri Museveni, the High Court has been attacked twice by the military to stop them taking a decision that they wanted to take, and actually inflicted injuries and damage on the judicial officers in those attacks. In the second attack, the judiciary, again, to their credit, protested and laid down their tools for more than a week. The whole judiciary in Uganda was closed down. And during that closure, the statements of the president were indeed very instructive. He said, you know, we are the ones in charge. And if you want me to go back to the bush, you can continue doing what you are doing. Of course, later on, they appeared to apologize for the nasty incidents, but the message was sufficiently delivered. So the institutions, all the institutions, and we talk about having elections. Elections cannot be anything but a farce under such circumstances, where the security of those elections are in the hands of those kinds of institutions that act without any restraint on the orders of one of the contestants. And the body that organizes the elections itself, the Electoral Commission, is a body that frankly functions simply as a walking stick of the president. He appoints it entirely, and the law requires that there is confirmation by Parliament. Parliament is another story I am coming to after this. Parliament is a very compliant parliament and just does everything that is required of them. And after it has been confirmed, that Electoral Commission, you find the president has power to sack any or all of it without reference to anybody. So you find an Electoral Commission that serves entirely at the pleasure of the president. And that is not just for purposes of retaining their jobs, but also knowing that their very lives can depend on what the mood of the president is indeed. And so we are talking about a situation where institutions, the institution of Parliament, we've talked about the judiciary, we've talked about the security institutions, talked about the Parliament which is supposed to be indeed the representation, the representative body of the people through which people exercise their authority. You know, in our case, it is common knowledge, just like in the election of the president, that if you don't have the institutions supporting you in the elections, if you don't have huge amounts of money, again, which is sponsored by the one who controls the purse, you cannot be elected. And indeed, even when you are elected, the Electoral Commission can announce a different outcome. So those who really want to be in Parliament, and most of it is largely for prestige, that I am the honorable member of Parliament, and also for pecuniary interests. Beyond that, there is absolutely no voice, and they know it. But if you are willing to have that deal, then you become an agent of that establishment, and your election can then be smooth. Not very smooth, because everyone wants to use that as a channel, so there is real brutal fights for becoming the candidate of the dictator. Because once you are the candidate, then you are as good as being in parliament already. And it's also interesting because, as you may notice, in our elections, very senior people lose their primary elections. Ministers, including ministers of very powerful institutions like defense or security, they can lose primary elections. That's not because there is some democratic process that is going on through which people have expressed themselves differently. It's actually because the dictator does not like experienced and more confident leaders to stay around them. And so elections are periods of purging. Those who, if they are around, can start questioning one or two things. And so we have that kind of parliament. In fact, one of the very demonstrative elements of how such a parliament functions is sometime in the just ended parliament, there were controversial issues relating to the oil that has been discovered in our country and how it is to be regulated. And Parliament took a very strong stand. It had just been elected, and it took a very strong stand in how regulations should be made to control this very useful resource. Only for them to realize that their patriotic work was somehow unappreciated by the president. And so the president, who is the chairman of their party, of course, ordered all of them to be loaded onto buses and taken to a remote place, which is an ideological school, where they are given military fatigues, all of them, the members of parliament are dressed in military fatigues, and for a week they are given military exercises in this ideological school, running up and down. And of course, Mr. Museveni himself dons his uniform as a military general and sits in front of them, and they all come saluting. And when he's satisfied that everybody now knows what to do, they go back to Parliament, and they reversed the 10 resolutions they had passed the previous week. Each and every one of them were reversed after coming back from that ideological school called Chankwanzi. So these are the institutions that we are talking about that make, in this case, the institution that makes the laws and makes the laws, because it is this same institution that has rewritten a constitution that I had the honor of being part of its writing only in 1995. The safeguards, the few safeguards that had made it to that constitution, which included term limits, the presidency, were very easily set aside by the parliament. Where maybe easily is a little too exaggerated, because the president had to pay each member 5 million shillings to facilitate that process, specifically for passing the change of the constitution to remove the term limits. And many other important safeguards have been similarly removed. In fact, as we talk now, There are some which are on the block. One, to do with the land, because in the Constitution as it is today, land belongs to the people and not to government. And for government to acquire land, government has power to acquire land compulsorily for public use. But in order to do so, they must compensate the landowner adequately and prior to such acquisition. And these are very, very important safeguards in a system like ours, where public use is most often not public. It's for changing hands from one person to another. That is on the block to be changed. There was also another safeguard that a president who clocks 75, or a person who is 75 years and above, cannot be re-elected. Mr. Museveni now, well, originally he said he didn't know when he was born, but more recently he assigned himself a birthday. And that birthday, unfortunately, makes him now 72 years, which means that he would not be eligible for election in the next round of elections. A resolution has already been tabled to the council of the party from one of the districts, calling on the party to change the constitution and remove that restriction on age limit. And as usual, of course, Mr. Museveni will say, I'm not interested in this at all. It is public demand, as you can see, which is forcing their way. I am a public servant. I have nothing to do but to acquiesce and amend the constitution and continue. So this is the state of our institutions. Citizens have no control in decision making. They have no control over their resources, and resources are used as opulently as wanton as they want, because there is simply no check that can stop that. The kind of corruption that we have in Uganda is unprecedented. Recently there was a government investigation on how money to deal with our roads has been used, and it was headed by actually a judge of government, and they have come up with a report that 4 trillion shillings has been sorted away from the road budget. Now, and this is one of the very many. So people know money is being stolen. They even know who stole it. But what can you do? There is absolutely no power in people's hands to stop the most blatant abuses that they face. So the central theme of my presentation to you is that independence did not change the power relations between leaders and the led. The leaders have remained masters, and the led have remained subjects who only service the will of those who lead. Now, my campaign in 2016 and my campaign all these years has actually been about that we must regain our citizenship, first and foremost. That we must regain our power to make decisions in our country. We must regain control of our countries. We have no control over these countries. We must regain control over these countries. We must regain, therefore, control of our institutions. We must regain control of our resources. And that if that does not happen, all these, fine sounding things we say in the elections, having the election manifesto on how youth are going to gain employment and how health care is going to improve and how education is going to, it's all a waste of time, because that can only happen if indeed citizens have power to check anybody who is to lead them. First, to decide who and how they will be led. And that remains the challenge of the African polity. How do citizens regain their authority? How do we reassert ourselves? And three things that we have been centering this campaign about. One is to change the mindset of our people. Because you see, our people, having been indeed subjects for that long, some of them don't even realize that they have no power and its consequences. They simply don't realize. More or less, the same phenomenon has happened with the domestic slaves that were in the slave states, who were in the front line of rejecting the end of slavery, saying, what's wrong with us? We are okay. Our masters are treating us well. Why do you want to change this? Some of our people are so used to kneeling down before leaders and begging for what leaders can do to them. Indeed, you'll hear quite often leaders in our country saying, you want to go back to the previous days. We are not killing you now. You should be grateful because now you are not being killed. And that should be a source of gratitude that you are not being killed. So even if you are being beaten, but you are not being killed. In fact, the head of the police, just a few weeks ago, and private citizens have taken him to court. There is a struggle there. The head of the police said on the day I was released on bail, many citizens powered on the streets simply to, rejoice and express happiness that I had been freed. And the police, went with sticks and, brutalized these citizens. On camera, they were, all media was there. So when the police head was interrogated about this, he said, look, this is actually all right, because these sticks don't kill. So I have told them that, you beat them, they go, and we don't spend money on tear gas even, and things like that, So, and because of his statements, some citizens have now started a private prosecution against him. As I was here, I understand the Constitutional Court has stopped it, has said that he can't, these private citizens can't prosecute him. I haven't yet quite known. It's an injunction, I think. They issued an injunction against that prosecution. I don't know the grounds under which it is being challenged. But that is the status. You find that citizens feel, even up to now, that if whatever they get from government, if they get a service by any chance, they have to be grateful. They don't have the concept that this service is a must to them. It's their taxes that are being used to give them that service, and actually that they are not getting as much as they should get. They don't know even what they should get. They don't know what tax they collected. So we want, this campaign is about reawakening our people to realize that we cannot live in a country as subjects, that we must regain our citizenship that we must regain control of our institutions, and that we must challenge and make sure that whoever leads our country is a servant and not a master, and that we are the masters. That is the first step in our campaign, reawakening our people to realize this. And this has been translated, this attitude has been translated over time in situations that make it difficult to change the politics, because the dictator, of course, controls all resources and has impoverished the citizens. By the way, unemployment, youth unemployment in Uganda is over 80%. Youth unemployment, it's unbelievable. The greatest, even those who are said to be employed, it's really many of them are in disguised unemployment. And many of the folks in the rural areas just live by the food they grow. They literally have absolutely nothing. And so at the time of elections, or this is what I was talking about, the parliament, or that the people are expecting is what those who are campaigning are going to give them, the handouts. So the control of the purse gives the different agents money to go and procure seats for whoever is to lead, and ultimately for himself. And people are extremely grateful, you know, if you give them, and it's not a lot of money. The highest that is paid is about $3, which is paid at the time of the election. Most don't even get $1 in exchange for their citizenship. And so this campaign is about reversing that, and I was extremely, you know, overjoyed in the last election, the election that just concluded in February. This was the very first time in our history when citizens this time were coming up and in droves to give me money instead, not me giving them, not demanding money from me, saying, please, this is our fight, take this, however little it is, let us fight on. I was emotionally touched, especially in one of the areas near a brother of mine, Ochoro, who is here, near his village, where I found an old lady. We don't speak the same language. That's one of the other problems of our countries, our artificial countries. We don't speak the same local language, so I couldn't understand what she was saying. But she held my hand after a public rally and pulled me aside, quite an aged lady. And she untied a sash they used to tie their clothes. And inside there was another piece of cloth which she untied and got out a coin, one coin, which was the only thing inside there. One coin of 500 shillings. That is a few cents. And she's put some saliva on it and handed it over to me. That saliva traditionally means blessing. And she said, you know, go and fight. So this campaign is bearing fruit, that people now realize it is their struggle. Previously they would say, we are praying for you. We support you, please go ahead. Fight for us. That has changed. They know they have to fight for themselves. They know it is for themselves, it's not for me. And they know what is arranged against them, the brutality, the guns that are arranged against them, they know. But they have understood that they can challenge those guns. We have explained that it is possible to challenge those guns when we don't have guns. Incidentally, I was part of a process that brought in General Museveni into power through a 5-year bitter war. And so I know that it is possible to challenge his guns using other guns. If we had wanted, we could have also looked for some guns and challenged them. because the population is behind us. If you have guns, even if there are a few guns and the population is behind you, you can defeat any army. Because the army, the other side will not have intelligence, they will not have the supplies you need, and so on and so forth. And that's how we won our war before. We could win the same war against Museveni using guns. But you see, once you do that, you are simply replacing the guns with other guns, which is what has been happening since independence. The new guns will not be controlled by the population. And so they will start doing exactly what the old guns were doing. The citizens will remain, the people will remain subjects. The new guns will remain the masters. And that's what we are challenging. And the only way to challenge it is to empower people so that they demystify the power of the guns and eventually overwhelm the guns without using guns. And once that happens, it is change forever. Guns will know that they cannot subjugate and dominate people. So the starting point is there. We are changing the mindset of our people. Secondly, people must have organizational tools that can afford them to speak together and to act together. Because at the end of the day, the legitimization of any dictatorship is easy if people have the same voice. You only get power if people give it to you. If people withdraw their cooperation, you've lost the power. And so if they know that they need to regain power, and if they know the tools they can use to link up and to have to say, no, we are going to cooperate with you in this, that's the power of the dictator gone. It is that process that is called defiance, to defy the injustice by coordinating and cooperating and saying, no, we are not going to have this. And it's very easy, you know. And again, through our campaign, they have already started realizing how effective it is. Because some time back, you know, traders were being harassed with all kinds of taxes and extortions and so on, until traders themselves organized and said, you know what, we cannot have this anymore. So they chose a day, and all of a sudden all of them closed their shops all over. And you know, the police was everywhere with their frightening tools, tear gas vehicles and all kinds of armament and equipment, but they didn't know what to do with these closed shops. And in a short while, there was no money in the treasury to sustain them on the streets. So the government had to come down on their knees and say, please, we beg you, all the other things we had imposed on you, we have removed them. You will reopen your shops. Now the traders were powerful. They said, wait a moment, we are not reopening. We first want you to put this in writing. And even when they put it in writing, yes, but now this is not enough. There are also the other things which we are not happy about. And so they had now, the ones who were in the weak position, they had regained their authority and their power. And we have seen now citizens just closing roads that are impassable, because you know, it becomes very expensive for them to take their commodities to the markets and so on. Roads are impassable, nobody's doing anything about it, and they close it. Some even plant banana plants in the road, say this road is now closed, unless you sign a contract to repair it, it will not be opened again. And in a short while they open it. So the other ones who were, so this works. So everybody is empowered. So the second thing is that coordination. Make sure that our people have tools to organize. And lastly, once they have the determination, the knowledge and determination, once they have the tools to organize, the final thing is for them to act. And they can act in various ways. They can act by protest, they can act by withdrawing cooperation, they can act by invasion. There are all kinds of non-violent means that can be used to disempower the dictatorship and to empower the citizens. And that's what we are doing. Of course, in the meantime, the dictatorship is ruthless. It's not going to take this or this seated down. That's why they must change laws and make laws very oppressive. In fact, now we have a law in Uganda called the Public Order Management Act, whereby if you are 3 or more people who meet to talk about matters of governance, you require the authority of the Inspector General of Police. If you are found doing that without the written authority of the Inspector General of Police, you are committing a crime, punishable in severe terms. I don't still remember the periods of imprisonment and so on. These are laws that have been put in place to make sure that they narrow the space of operation of citizens in challenging what they do. That you cannot meet, you cannot act together, hence undermining the tools of organization. That is why many people in this process get arrested and get charged with all kinds of offenses. That is why in this process, the lawyers are vital allies of the struggle. Because activists will feel empowered more if they know that once I'm arrested, there is somebody who can plead for me, who can come and apply for bail for me to get out of jail, who can follow my case and plead for me. They become more empowered, that I'm not lost into the jails and being tortured without anybody raising an alarm. And so we are trying to work with lawyers, and indeed, even we are trying to seek the attention and assistance of your organizations here on how our lawyers can be more active and participate in this kind of thing, protecting activists who are seeking to regain their power. But additionally, in challenging, in public interest litigations, in challenging some of the laws that are made, which actually violate either our constitution directly or international covenants, that these kind of laws can be struck down if we don't want to leave arrangements that unite us with the international community. So these are critical elements that facilitate a struggle for liberation, for regaining our citizenship. And, as I have pointed out, this is not just a struggle for Uganda, it's the struggle that we have today in Africa. Struggle for citizenship, struggle to regain control of our decision making, control of our institutions, control of our resources. And I have no doubt that Ugandans are on the way to achieving this. Yes, some people will be inconvenienced along the way. Some people will be hurt. Indeed, some people question me, how do you sustain this? But I am the lucky one. Although I'm involved in all this, I'm here in New York talking to you and moving all over the place. Many of our colleagues died a long time ago from this struggle. So not continuing to do what we are doing does not only mean our children will continue to live in circumstances that condemn them to terrible situations, but it will mean that we've betrayed those who have done whatever they have done in the hope that we live in better countries indeed. So I would like to suggest to you that the rule of law that we are struggling with must be underpinned by having citizens that have power, and that therefore from there that we will arise laws that are just, institutions that are just, and that can serve citizens in an equitable and fair way. And that is the struggle that we are conducting. Struggle for citizenship. Thank you very much.
I'll let him field those from the podium.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. It was a bleak picture of Uganda, but it was sincere. One of the thoughts that came to mind as I was listening is, what would be the role, the potential role for technology to sort of unite people to deal with those translation issues, the language issues, and to maybe reach the rural areas so people can better communicate and perhaps form these grassroots movements to have an effect. And the other part of my question is, what percentage of the population are youth? You said that 80% of the youth are unemployed, but is it a young population, an older population? Is there that potential for technology having an effect? And the third part of my question is there equally a risk that that movement with technology, perhaps with Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, would actually backfire and be instead a tool of manipulation and used against the population by those in power to identify those who would challenge them?
Yeah, thank you very much. The role of technology is immense, and we are already experiencing the benefit of that. We haven't, frankly, explored the use of technology in linking us through translation of our local languages. And that indeed may be a very complicated task, because Uganda is a small country, incidentally, though we are 35 million of us. But we have about 56 different types of languages, and many of them, well, some are dialects, really, not languages, but some of the dialects are dialects that are far removed from each other. It's something that I think one would well do with the investigating how this can be narrowed by technology. But happily, because of the global campaign for universal education, you'll find that now greatest majority of young people can speak and understand English. And we would want that also to be translated into them speaking and understanding at least one of our local languages. It's another debate we are having. But where technology has scored an immense success is in getting indeed all these young people share information, especially through the Facebook. You'll be surprised how deeply, these social media platforms have penetrated the rural areas. You know, anything you post, you get in a short while people commenting from all kinds of corners of the country. And so this has reduced the power of the dictator. A short while back, when we had you know, protests and so on, we were using FM radios to have information spread around. And these were closed by the government. In the last election, the social media platforms were closed, all of them. But in no time, people had acquired the knowledge of using something they call VPN, which allows them to bypass the local controls that are there on the internet in our area. So people continued corresponding. So social media has been extremely helpful in getting people together. Our population, we are actually a youthful country. Slightly more than 50%. I think we are the youngest population possibly in the world. Slightly more than 50% of our population is below 15 years. Yeah. 15 years and below are more than half of our people. So we are a country of children, later on young people. And that imposes, of course, a lot of challenges, but also quite a lot of opportunities. So when I talk about unemployed young people, it is literally the whole of our workforce. And that's why it's scary. But as I have said, it's also a great opportunity that can be tapped into. Manipulation, of course, as I have said, every patrimonial dictatorial regime excels in getting and using manipulative tools to manipulate sections of the society. Today, in fact, even last night I saw there was, thank you, there was on the TV a picture of the president distributing money to people working in markets. And they had this big check, dummy check printed out for 100 million shillings that was being given to young people who are working in a particular market. And that is supposed to be for giving them a startup on how to start up for their businesses. Now, the impact of that is not so much on those who get it, because of course very few people get it, but it is to create an expectation in others that if you align yourself with the system, then you are the one in line to also get, and therefore to disempower them, to take away their energy and enthusiasm in challenging the dictatorship. So manipulation, yes, is a lot of manipulation of the young people, not just using the social media platforms, but actually using tools of distributive tools of the administration. Yeah, there was somebody else here, I think.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Emerson Sykes. I'm the legal advisor for Africa at the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. And we work worldwide on laws that govern civil society. And so I was very interested in hearing your discussion about citizens being active and associating and also being able to speak out. That's very much what we do. And we actually right now have a project in Uganda and I was in Kampala when Inspector General Kayihura congratulated his officers for their restraint and only using sticks. So, so we work with lawyers as well as other kinds of civil society groups in Uganda, and you brought up two specific cases, and it was a bleak discussion, but one bright spot is the strength of certain folks within the judiciary. And if you mentioned both the case against Inspector General Kayihura and also the constitutional challenge to the Public Order Management Act. And maybe I'm just looking for a bit of encouragement in our work, but best case scenario, if those two cases do go well, where do you see that pushing us? Do you see any potential impact that these brave efforts on behalf of Ugandan lawyers might achieve some kind of change? Thanks.
Oh yes, you know, civil society activism certainly works. As I have said, first of all, it emboldens people to become more activist. But secondly, it can lead to drawback on the advance of repressive measures that are being put. Of course, at the end of the day, you know, dictatorships are also survive by impunity. Doesn't matter what the law says. They'll do what, in fact, most of the times, the things they do are against the law. But they will do them. They will stop meetings, not because we don't have powers of us, the right to assemble in the Constitution. These rights are protected in our Constitution, actually. And that's why when they try to draw back on them in the laws, one can successfully challenge them. But that does not stop them doing what is disallowed within the law. Eventually, however, because of the emboldening of citizens, active citizenry, they will defy and challenge those injustices in a fundamental way that eventually leads to the dictatorship itself, either negotiating a transition or collapsing. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Besigye. I'm a Ugandan American, but my question is, how do we regain citizenship? You talked about the colonial period and independence and how instruments of coercion kind of just changed hands. But there is, I guess I was reading a book about Cote d'Ivoire, and it seems like what we're dealing with in a lot of African countries is very similar. A lot of elites holding instruments of coercion and a lot of discrimination among ethnic groups, and then the people's, African peoples trying to have a kind of a say in the governments of their countries, so that like when different leaders come to power, say someone comes from my group, they tend to bring a lot of their, king and forth, and it becomes a nepotistic system, and everyone is looking for a turn, to kind of be the one kind of distributing the resources, and then you have a situation whereby the president, when I'm president, everyone's saying, oh, we want someone, we have ministers, we want representative in your government from our region, so that we can gain some of the benefits of independence or citizenship. But in reality, nothing really changes because everyone is serving their own interests. So how do we change that? Because it seems like the elites that have, especially independents, that have gone to these Western universities, had these Westminster ideas, which are great, because they were democratic ideals, but there was no bridge. There was no bridge between because when we talk about when did we have citizenship, I mean, what was the pre-colonial situation? And how was that changed with the colonial system? And are we kind of superimposing ideas without actually bringing our people along to how do they...
Yeah, well, if I understand your question well, I think it is through the 3 steps that I talked about. One is decolonizing our minds, regaining the understanding and the importance of our role as citizens in order to reclaim it. First of all, it is really mindset. That is the starting point. And mindset is through campaign of information, of imparting information, and of demonstrating the possibilities, which is why I was telling you about the small achievements that people fight for and get. That emboldens them to fight for even higher things. So it's a process. It's a process of empowerment of citizens. And secondly, you know, once they regain their confidence, and regaining their confidence leads to reducing their fear. Because what the tool of control is fear. You know, the fear that you will be harmed, the fear that you will be imprisoned, the fear that you will lose opportunity, the fear that is what paralyzes people. But once they gain knowledge that all this can be overcome, their fear goes down, and therefore they are more emboldened to say, no, we are not going to do that. No, we are not going to obey you in what you are doing. And that is what disempowers any dictator. And as I have said, you know, we should not rely, and this is something that we've been even in our situation confronted with. You know, people ask me quite often, how sure are we that if you were to become president, you will be different from those that we have seen before? Because those that we have seen before have been saying the very good things that we hear you say. But when they get the opportunity, then they change. It should not depend on me. It should depend on them. That they have control over anybody who leads them. And that once he starts, or he, she, or starts doing something that is outside what they want, you know, populating all institutions with his relatives and friends and so on, that they are able to say, this is not what we want you to get out, you know, that they are able to, and that leaders in turn now get to understand that they have masters, and that whatever they are doing, they are looking over their shoulders to see what the masters are saying. So it's the change of that whole system that is going to give us good governance, accountable leaderships, not the goodness and well-intentionedness of the incumbent. It's good, of course, to have that too.
What would be the consequences of your movement, your party, what was categorized, having unlimited funds? What would be the consequences of that?
Of having unlimited or limited funds?
Unlimited funds.
Our movement?
Yeah. What would be the consequences?
Well, it would be a positive consequence.
Well, I know that. I'm not joking here. I really would like to know.
Well, I'm not so sure that I understand what you're saying. Quite obviously, resources, funding of the activities that I have talked about, yes, is important.
Right.
Funding of a campaign. Every campaign needs funds. You need people who organize and manage campaigns, who themselves must be looked after. You need logistics for any campaign.
So it is a significant factor.
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely. Yes, maybe the last one. Okay, maybe the two ladies and the well.
Thank you, Dr. Besigye. My concern is education for its majority population. When I was last in Uganda, I spent a day in school. And it just so happened that that day they were having a parents-teachers meeting in this school in Kabale. And the parents-teachers spent the majority, and headmasters, spent the majority of time trying to figure out what was going to be done. I hate to make it very graphic, but they're trying to figure out what to do with the toilets, because many the toilets that they had on the school premises were being filled up by the end of the school day because they only had one pickup of the, you know what I mean, from the latrines, which really blew my mind. That how many years after independence, that they're still using trucks to come and pick up sewage from the toilets, and that because it fills up so quickly, the students either cheat and go to where the teachers go to relieve themselves, or they go out in the fields, which creates a hygiene problem. So I'm concerned about the condition of schools. You know, of course, about the conditions of hospitals, because you brought quite a bit of attention to that in Uganda. But you really didn't speak to why is the population of Uganda so young. It has to do with those things, education and health. How in the world is Uganda going to be able to lift itself out of this enormous crisis and be functional if you were ever elected president?
Well, at the end of the day, you know, it's a question of priorities. You see, in a regime like those that we have had, which I was laboring to describe, the overwhelming preoccupation is regime survival, not the survival of the people. And so allocation of resources is in places that will protect the regime rather than in places that will foster betterment of the people. So whereas, for example, you know, you have a lot of resources going to the security institutions, you have far less resources going to education. But secondly, even the resources that go to education, because you have a completely unaccountable system, even the resources that go to the education will be stored at the different levels of control in the education. So very little actually goes to impact those pupils you saw. Because even that school headmaster you saw, the little money that arrives in the school goes to his own bank account, does not go to the people. And the education supervisor is involved in all these things. So unless we have an accountable system and one that prioritizes service delivery, so prioritizes people, all that cannot change. But if we indeed have investment in people, things can change quite fast. And my whole thesis is that that investment people will not happen unless people themselves have cause the demand. We must improve the demand side in order for the supply to follow. I think it was.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. I am proud to be a Ugandan. I'm proud to be from Uganda. And I'm proud to be FDC, part of the party. I have gone through some of the things that you have heard him talk about. In the streets, you're supporting your party leader, and you're taking up, and that day you're in prison, you're sleeping in a police, and it's okay. But I wanted to ask or suggest, can we have, like you said, sensitizing? You go in, and there's this fear that something is going to happen. First, your parents are going to deny you because they need the security, right? And then you leave that side, you're thinking, they are going to tell you, if you would support us, if you will come out and then say that I am for the yellow party, which is the present current party, then you will survive. So as you sensitize the people, because we supported, we were there, and then you're thinking, is it better for me to just give in?
The risk, you are talking about the risk.
The risk. So how do you sensitize us who are supporting that if we are taken in, we should really stand and not give in? I looked at this gentleman who was supporting Babazi, who came back after he was taken away for 3 months. I wasn't in the country, but I kept on following.
Yeah.
And you're wondering how can we be sensitized to be strong enough to say, no, I will not stand for that party, I will still.
Yeah, just like I said, you know, it is faith is the opposite of fear. The more faith you have, the less fearful you are. even in terms of those who believe in religious faith. The more faith you have, the less fearful. So we need to improve on our faith through knowledge, through demonstration that this can happen and you will still be there. People are no longer as fearful of being imprisoned as they were, because they see me go in and get out and tear gassed and I'm still here, and and they also have now known that there is no shortcut to struggling and standing for your right if they are to get a different kind of situation. So that's why I'm very happy myself. I'm very excited actually as we talk that Ugandans have taken a stand. In fact, even after the last election, as you know, as was introduced by Eric, you know, Mr. Museveni has sworn himself in as a president, but the people don't call him a president. They say we have the people's president. You can be president, and that's why, and it's very difficult for him now. People have remained defiant. If he gets a visit and wants to tour the town, they have to close the streets because they fear the population. And that is not sustainable. So people have taken a stand, and that is increasingly getting more so. And the more we get support and international voices coming to say, you know, people are entitled to this and that, the more they become emboldened. And so thank you very much. I think we should not overburden our hosts. I'm extremely grateful once again that all of you could spare time and be here with us. This is a story of Africa. It's not just a story of Uganda. And many people have been there before us. We are simply adding on to the monumental contributions that many of our forefathers and those that have come before us have made. Let each and every one of us make their small contribution. It adds up. Just do what you can, wherever you are, use what you have. That is our motto at home. Do what you can with whatever you have, wherever you are. And it adds up. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Sure.
Helps you? Yeah. Brenda, help you. We're going to do a quick photo. Sure. Okay. If you don't mind.
I'm going to do two like this.
Okay, just do it.
All right, ready?
You're looking at the real boss. She tells us what to do. Thank you so very much. It's great to see you. Wish you the very best in the rest of your visit. If you need any help along the way, let us know. If you need help in your home, of course. And I'll be in touch with Ochoro, with David.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you once again.
I told you who's in charge. I think this is your